so many of us are disassociated from our bodies. We are so used to overthinking or being inside of our heads that we're not really tuning in to what's happening with our bodies when we're in a moment where we feel dangerous. And so it really is allowing ourselves to have the opportunity to check in with our body on a regular basis.
Welcome to Talkin' Shit, the podcast where we get real about the unfiltered truths women face in the quest for perfection. I'm Jana, your host, a dietitian and fellow woman navigating the pressure to have it all together, the perfect body, career, relationships, and making it all look effortless. Who set that standard anyway? Here, we're calling out the diet fads, hustle culture, beauty standards, and everything else that keeps us feeling stuck. But we're not just venting, we're diving into how to break free and rewrite the rules on your terms. So grab a coffee or a glass of wine and let's talk some shit. Together, we'll uncover how to live a life that's unapologetically yours. This is Talkin' Shit. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Today I have Kim that is joining in, and I will say, I think this is going to be one of the most powerful podcasts to date because this is something that so many women have shared with me and also probably with Kim that really holds them back from achieving their full potential. And so, Kim, I'm so glad that we were able to connect and that you are giving us your time today. Thank you so much for being willing to share your expertise.
Oh, thank you, Jana, for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I'm Kim Jackson-Massaro. I'm a nervous system coach, and I work with women, mainly women specifically, to help them regulate their nervous system in a time and a place and in a culture where we are often dysregulated by the 24-hour news cycle and the expectations that we have as wives and mothers and workers and all the other things that we have on our plate. And so I use a lot of somatic techniques to help women balance their nervous system and bring regulation back to their lives.
Hi, I wanted to share something completely new with you. My how to eat fast food and lose weight guide. Because sometimes dinner comes in a paper bag through your car window, and no, that doesn't mean you failed at eating healthy. This guide was created for real women with real lives, from juggling careers or kids or both to those nights when cooking just isn't happening. I'll show you how to make choices that support your health, even when fries are on the menu. Inside, I'll show you the exact menu hacks from McDonald's, Taco Bell, Starbucks, and other major chain fast food restaurants that keep your blood sugar steady, cravings calm, and your jeans fitting. Grab the guide today, go to my website, healthwins.org, and snag your instant download. What does somatic actually mean?
Somatic has to do with what we in the world of psychotherapy talk about the fourth wave of psychotherapy. And so the first three waves of psychotherapy, often most of us are familiar with. It was first Freud and sitting on the couch and having someone psychoanalyze you. The second wave was behaviorism. So we ring a bell, you start to salivate. The third wave was cognitive behavioral therapy. And so really looking at our thoughts and how our thoughts drive our behaviors. And how many therapists talk about that is it's a top-down way of trying to address the body and what's happening with our behaviors. Whereas somatic techniques in the fourth wave of treatment has to do with bottom up, or addressing the symptoms in the body to help regulate our nervous system and really then address our thoughts.
Why do we want to shift into body regulation?
Well, our body has this process that Stephen Porges from Polyvagal calls interoception. And so when we are in the environment, when we are having things happen around us or to us, our mind, our subconscious mind and our conscious mind, they have a different way of processing the information that's coming in. And so our conscious mind, the one that we walk around with and are able to, cook an egg on the stove or drive ourselves to work, our conscious mind is able to bring in about 40 bits of information per second. So what we see in the environment is only able to process it about 40 bits a second. Whereas our subconscious memory, our subconscious mind, excuse me, processes about 4 million bits per second. And so much of what happens inside of our body, we do not have conscious awareness of. And so we can see something, or we can hear something, or we can feel something against our skin, and it's going to trigger an autonomic nervous system response inside of our body without our conscious awareness. And so being able to become more in touch with our body and our body sensations, and knowing when we are feeling a certain way and inside of our body. Maybe I'm having tightness in my chest, or I'm having discomfort in my stomach. Maybe my stomach feels like it's twisting. Oftentimes that represents an autonomic nervous system response for us. And if we really pay attention to that and we tune into that sensation, oftentimes we can find an emotion that's tied to it, and then maybe even a thought that drives behavior from that point.
Yeah. So this is what I'm thinking of is when a lot of people share, including myself, this idea of like, I know what to do, I just don't do it.
Mhm.
How is that connected to like the body experience?
Well, there's a lot of protective mechanisms in place for our body, and our autonomic nervous system has ways that it's learned to cope over time. And many of the ways that we learn to cope stem from our childhood, when we learned that a particular behavior helped us feel protected in some way. And so we may have had a childhood where people weren't very nice to us, or we had a sibling that picked on us a lot, and we ended up being hurt by that situation. Well, we may have learned as children that a way to make ourselves feel better was to go into the kitchen and make a bowl of cereal and pour sugar all over it and pour milk on it and then eat that. And in that effort, we were able to make ourselves feel better. Not only did we get a dopamine hit, but we were also providing ourselves with nurturance in a situation where we had been maybe traumatized in some way. And so we learn these coping mechanisms over time to be able to bring us through our lives. And if we can think about those behaviors in terms of, this was a way that I acted in the past that helped me feel safe and helped me feel protected. And instead of judging ourselves for continuing to turn to a behavior that in the past, it was actually adaptive for us to do that because it helped us get through a really difficult time. If we can take that judgment off it and shine the light of self-compassion on there, sometimes it's easier for us to step into change instead of judging ourselves or beating ourselves up for doing the same old thing again and again.
Yeah. Why does that feel so counterintuitive to provide self-compassion to say like, and I work with a lot of women that are trying to lose weight, as I shared before we started recording, and maybe struggle with binge eating. Whenever I share, we need to be compassionate with that and we need to thank that because it was keeping you safe. Why is there a reservation to doing so? Because we kind of think that like we need to be really hard on ourselves in order to like get our shit together. But that usually keeps us in the same cycle. So why is that? Why is there such a barrier to being kind to ourselves?
I think there can be many reasons, but I also think that it's part of our culture. There's a culture of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, making yourself the only way to get yourself to really do something is talk harshly to yourself. And I think that many of us grow up in situations where that was the message that we received. Like in some way, you're a failure because you can't get your shit together. In some way, you're broken because you can't lose the weight or whatever it is. And I think we get conditioned to believe that the only way to make ourselves do something is to be really harsh on ourselves. And, I grew up in a generation, I'm not sure your age, but I grew up in a generation where it was the belt, right? It was the, you listen to me, you do what I say, and, and then you'll turn into a good kid. And so there was a lot of harshness in growing up in the generation that I grew up in too. And so I think that it can come from multiple directions, this harshness that we have in ourselves, and like, just get yourself together. I do that to myself sometimes too. Like, talk to myself in a way where I'm like, come on, Kim. Or I often say, Kimmy, you can do better, you know? And and it is, I think, a foreign idea, or not a very comfortable idea to embrace, this idea of self-compassion. But Kristen Neff is a wonderful person to read and to review her blog and her website. She has three components of self-compassion. And the biggest one that I talk to people about is the idea that when you are bringing in self-compassion, well, there's two that I really love. One is, it's the idea of bringing yourself empathy, right? And Brene Brown is one of my favorite social workers ever. And she talks about the idea of when we are in the middle of shame and when we are in the middle of struggle, the last thing that we need is more shame to be heaped on top of that. And when we talk to ourselves in such a way and beat ourselves up and be harsh with ourselves and tell ourselves that we have to be mean to ourselves in order to be able to get where we want to be, that's like heaping shame on top of ourselves in a moment where, if we were to bring light in and bring in self-compassion and say, one of the things that Kristen Neff talks about is recognizing that I'm having a human experience. Like, I'm not the only person who's ever experienced something like this. And what I'm experiencing is a very human moment, a very human condition. And I think it was her that had in her book, when you're going through a struggle, one of the things that you can say to yourself is, of course I feel this way. I'm going through a really hard time. Of course I feel this way. And when I'm able to bring that in, or bring that into sessions with my clients, it can be pretty transformational when you acknowledge, like, what you're going through is really hard. It's a really difficult thing.
Yeah. One thing that I was taught in my own personal journey was to identify the emotion. So I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling it in my chest, and it makes sense. It's a very short practice, but it's amazing how powerful it is, because we get to name it, we get to feel it in our body, and then we get to make sense of it versus pushing it away or pushing it aside and really dismissing it. And I think that that's also what you're highlighting here, is we want to acknowledge those things that are coming up that are part of the human experience, and in no way is that abnormal, which I think oftentimes emotions have really been put into this category of like, you shouldn't feel this way, when in reality, we all feel this way in different points in time in our life. So you shared with me before we started recording that you really work on limiting beliefs. What are some of the most popular, if you will, limiting beliefs that individuals share with you that they're experiencing, or maybe that you identify for them?
Yeah. So the work that I do, one of the techniques that I use is called emotional freedom techniques. Oftentimes it's called tapping. And in the world of tapping, we often talk about what are called tabletop issues. And tabletop issues have to do with those limiting beliefs. Oftentimes those limiting beliefs are things that we developed when we were very, very young. Probably before the age of 7, when we were still in that theta brainwave hypnagogic state where the things that were said to us became like we were hypnotized and we truly believed that those things were true. And so oftentimes the things that come up specifically for limiting beliefs have to do with things like, I'm not good enough. I don't deserve it. I'm not worthy of it. I'll never have it. because I'm not worth it. So these are the types of limiting beliefs that I often see come up. And within the world of tapping, we often call those tabletop issues, and that the legs of the tables have to do with different experiences that we've had throughout our lives, where those beliefs were, one, we were told that that was true, and two, we had things that reinforced those beliefs. And so if you're a 6-year-old and you learn this idea that you don't deserve to get anything, right? We hear the message a lot in the grocery store. You have to earn it, or you don't deserve that. You haven't been a good girl, right? And so you believe that about yourself. What often happens is we develop a lens that comes in front of our eyes. It becomes this belief that we put in front of our face. And then every interaction that we have from that point forward, we're looking at the world through that lens. And so every event that takes place in our life where we come up against this idea of, are you good enough, or do you deserve this? We're looking through the lens that says, no, we don't deserve it. And so we have these events that take place in our lives that begin to reinforce this belief that we don't deserve it, or that we're not good enough, or that we're not worthy. And so in tapping, our goal is to try to address these particular incidences that happen and how we encode those in our limbic system. We encode them through visual cues and auditory cues and kinesthetic cues and thoughts and feelings inside of our bodies. And so you address each of those within the tapping to try and address that within the limbic system, to let the limbic system know that that event is now over. And as you begin to address each of those individual events that take place in your life, it begins to knock down the legs of the table. And if there's 50 legs in the table, maybe you only have to address 10 of them to get the table to fall over, and to have that limiting belief no longer be something that drives your life or is the lens that you look through and colors every event that takes place after that. So if you're struggling with a limiting belief that says you're not allowed to be thin, or you're not allowed to be healthy, you're going to be looking through that lens each time you come against an event, i.e., okay, I'm going to try to change my habits related to my food and to moving my body. And you think to yourself, well, I don't deserve that. I'm not worthy of a thin and healthy body. I haven't earned it. I haven't done enough. I'm not good enough. And if you're faced with having that limiting belief every time you try to make a change, of course, you're going to run up against roadblocks that keep you from reaching your goal.
I am feeling this in my stomach. This is so, I think, healing for those, well, for myself, one, so thank you. And two, for those that are listening to this as well. And you said something that I thought was so powerful previously. You said, when it comes to these limiting beliefs, it often doesn't feel safe to feel good. Can you share more about that? Because I think that's so powerful to even think about when we're really looking at feeling our best. Like, people will say like, why don't I want to feel good? And it sounds like it's because it doesn't feel safe to.
Right. So I think that brings us back to the idea of the autonomic nervous system and the 40 million bits of, or 40 million, 4 million bits of information that our body is perceiving from moment to moment. And when it comes to the autonomic nervous system, many of us, and I always like to think of it in terms, I use my hands a lot, but I think of it in terms of our body is really designed to be in homeostasis. Our body is designed to be able to fluidly and flexibly handle unsafe things or dangerous things when they come into our environment. And so when our body perceives danger, our body will go into the fight or flight mode, and it'll begin to mount a response. It'll start to tense our muscles, and our eyes will dilate. And so our eyes will be ready to pay attention to all the things around us. And it is an adaptive response for our body to be able to go into fight or flight. But when that moment is over, our body is designed to go back into rest and repair and allow our body to recalibrate and let all of the adrenaline and cortisol to get out of our bodies so that we can go back into homeostasis and be ready to be prepared for the next event that could potentially be dangerous. Well, we live in a society right now where danger is around every corner. And so many of us have had our body habituated to be in fight or flight much more often than we are in rest and repair. And so if you become familiar with being in the place of fight or flight, your body perceives that as to be the normal state of being. And so you're going to hang out in fight or flight. You're going to hang out in inflammation. You're going to hang out in tension and stress. And that is going to be your way of being most of the time. And so when you begin to introduce things into your life that are going to bring you back into rest and repair, oftentimes that feels really uncomfortable. It feels unfamiliar, and your body senses that something doesn't feel normal, so to speak. And so there are times where your body will begin to resist going into rest and repair. And it'll try to bring you back into fight or flight because that's what's normal. That's what your body has been habituated to crave. So these moments where we're trying to bring these feelings of well-being or these feelings of living our best, highest self, sometimes can be difficult or challenging to bring about because our body may try to resist those. So usually when I work with people and we're working with the nervous system and we're trying to introduce moments of rest and repair, I talk about the importance of building in micro moments of rest and repair, introducing these somatic techniques little by little so that your body can begin to develop more flexibility in that direction. In the world of psychotherapy, we would kind of look at the DSM, right? If we were talking about a diagnosis that someone might have, maybe anxiety or depression. Dan Siegel, who is a amazing psychologist and no, he's a medical doctor, I'm sorry. And he has these wonderful books about somatic techniques and specifically geared towards children. But he talks about when we open the DSM, what we are seeing is a categorization of behaviors that often have to do with either rigidity or chaos. It's either rigidity or chaos. And whenever we go to psychotherapy, what we're doing is we're trying to bring more flexibility to our nervous system. We're trying to bring back the ability to, instead of being very, very rigid about things or very, very chaotic, we're trying to bring that balance of being able to respond and recover, respond and recover. And so when you try to change that behavior, when you are trying to bring new behaviors and behaviors of rest and repair or behaviors of I'm going to take really good care of my body instead of not taking good care of my body, sometimes it's hard to do that because we have been habituated to stay in that fight or flight response.
Mm-hmm. Is that why it can be really hard to be consistent with routines?
I think that has to do with a combination of the autonomic nervous system and the limiting beliefs. Because I think consistency sometimes has to do with the thoughts that we tell ourselves in the middle of struggle. So if our nervous system is dysregulated and we're not feeling like we want to go to the gym, right? Our body is like, I'm too tired. I don't want to go. I don't feel good, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
We might start thinking to ourselves a certain thought like, well, I'm still fat. Why should I go to the gym? It's not working. And so we might bring in those limiting beliefs that support the autonomic nervous system's physical response that we're having. And so I think it's a combination when we have trouble with consistency.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes so much sense. So if someone's really like resonating with this and can identify maybe where they are. Because I also see it as like a level, you have to be aware that this is even happening first and foremost, versus like being unconscious to like, well, this is just the normal, right? So that there's almost like that step forward to say like, okay, and this isn't normal. There's a balance between the two of, yes, this has been my normal for so many years, but this really isn't actually normal. I see that. But like, what could an individual start practicing to really come back to their body and start that journey of getting back into a healthy equilibrium?
Well, I think the technique that you shared earlier about naming what's happening in your body is a really important first step
Mhm.
because so many of us live from here up.
So true. Yeah. And for those of you that can't see, it's basically in our head. We live in our, uh-huh.
So, so many of us are disassociated from our bodies. We are so used to overthinking or being inside of our heads that we're not really tuning in to what's happening with our bodies when we're in a moment where we feel dangerous. And so it really is allowing ourselves to have the opportunity to check in with our body on a regular basis and write it down. Have a chance, maybe 3 times a day. You're going to say to yourself, I'm going to consciously tune into my body and ask my body how it's feeling. And it doesn't have to just be a moment of stress. It can also be a moment where I feel really good, right? So I might think to myself, all right, I'm going to stop for 60 seconds and I'm going to do a scan of my body. And from head to toe, I'm going to look and see, where am I feeling tension? Am I feeling it in my shoulder or my hip, or am I feeling it in my knees? And if my body could tell me what kind of emotion was tied to that tension or that discomfort that I have into my body, what would it be? Would it be I'm feeling overwhelmed, or I'm feeling stressed, or I'm feeling afraid? And then even in moments where I'm feeling good, okay, where do I feel really good? Oh, I'm feeling this lightness in my chest. My chest feels really expansive, and it makes me want to have a smile to my face. It makes me feel um, almost like almost like happiness, almost like joy. And being able to distinguish and being able to tell the difference between tension and tightness in our body and expansiveness, because sometimes tension can feel like expansiveness or diffuseness, and it may differ from person to person. We each have our own unique relationship to our body and how our body lets us know when it feels symptoms or signs of safety or danger.
Mhm. Where would you say most women in particular start feeling that they are unsafe? So I'm thinking a lot of women have shared with me that they feel it in their chest or their stomach.
Mhm.
Um, do you notice anything? Like, are there trends, or is that also just very personalized for the person?
It is very unique to the person. Although you will see a lot of women have it in their stomach, which when it comes to learning about polyvagal theory, which is one of the underlying techniques that I use in my practice, um, the stomach or the GI tract is related to the dorsal vagal
Mhm.
autonomic nervous system response. And dorsal vagal has to do with collapse. So it has to do with draw. It has to do with when we have tried to fight or flee long enough and we were not able to, oftentimes our body will drop down into that dorsal vagal response. And so that autonomic nervous system response in dorsal vagal will sometimes trigger the stomach to have things like constipation, diarrhea, IBS, other sort of GI tract related complications that many women deal with. And so I know that if I'm working with someone with tapping and a lot of their energy goes to their stomach, it may also be possible that they have GI issues or they struggle with stomach upset or constipation or some of those other uh, conditions.
Mhm.
Um, so what I would say is that the stomach and the chest are core areas. And these are areas that we often are triggered to protect when we are in danger. And so our bodies often move towards the center of our body to protect us when we are being attacked by a lion or tiger or a person inside of our lives. And so these are large areas of our body that we feel the need to protect. So I think when the autonomic nervous system is being triggered, that big issues like fear or anger or stress tend to centralize in the chest and the stomach. But I also have many clients who will feel danger in their arms or they'll feel it in their legs. And I'll ask for more details about that. And they'll say, oh, I feel like I need to punch my way out of here, or I feel like I need to run away, which also coincides with the sympathetic nervous system response, which is the fight or flight response. So they'll feel that energy, that sympathetic response, and they'll want to run or flee. And so I think that it has to do with what it's tied to memory wise with your body, but also where you are with your autonomic nervous system. If you are in a more activated state, if you are feeling more energy in your body, you may feel it more in your limbs. But if you are feeling more shut down or withdrawn, you may feel it more in the core of your body.
So, are you saying that if we really work on these somatic or use these somatic techniques, that potentially, or that you've even witnessed, that women may see resolution of some of their stomach concerns, say constipation or IBS, or even maybe reduced anxiety? Like, is that possible with using these techniques?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I really want to highlight that, Kim, because so often what I see is a referral for, to meet with a dietitian, or like, I just need to fix whatever foods I have. And this is where I say food is part of the equation, but it's not the entirety of the equation. Your body is talking to you. Whether we're listening or not is the question mark. And there are so many other things beyond food. Yes, certainly food and nutrition is very important. And there's so many other techniques that we can really support individuals to ultimately feel their best, and can potentially, for many, even resolve some of their symptoms that they're experiencing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's important to recognize and highlight the idea that emotions are signals that the body gives us when our body is not feeling safe generally. And so if we feel afraid or we feel angry or we feel stress or overwhelmed, our body will often give us cues inside of us to let us know that our body is not feeling safe. And oftentimes we push those signals down. We're like, no, body, I don't have time to listen to your signals. I've got, children to run to school and a job to get to and 900 other things. And so we will often push those signals down or not pay attention to them. And you said something earlier about this idea of emotions are something that are there for a reason. They're there, and oftentimes we push them away or push them down and decide not to feel them. And really, the idea behind tapping and other somatic techniques is that we allow ourselves to feel the feelings that are coming up, not push them away or pretend that they don't exist, but recognize them as signals inside of our body, letting us know when a boundary has been crossed, when we're feeling like life has become too much and maybe we need to pull back a little bit and provide ourselves with a little bit of self-care. Our body lets us know in the signals that it's turning on inside to let us know, like, our stomach is not feeling great. I'm feeling really angry right now, and my stomach feels like it's twisting into a knot. Maybe it's okay for me to pay attention to that anger and recognize that behind that anger was a boundary violation that I just would have normally let slide.
Yeah. So there's two things that I want to highlight with this is that emotions aren't just the more negative emotions, right? Like of the like certainly the anger and frustration. I think we really do need to feel those because I think a lot of people are feeling that. And also we want you to feel the really positive emotions like excitement and joy and wonder. Like when we're talking about experiencing emotions, it's experiencing all the emotions, not just maybe the more negative ones. And I think that can be really eye-opening because sometimes I'll just speak for myself because that's the only person I can speak for. But when I was getting into this myself, I was like, you want me to do what with these emotions? I don't want to feel these negative emotions. And it was very eye-opening for me to understand that I get to feel the good ones too, because I was really struggling with stepping into those emotions as well. So when you feel, you get to feel all of it, and that can be really healing in and of itself. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I absolutely agree with that. I think when you restrict yourselves from feeling the negative emotions, what happens is you restrict all emotions. And if you think about it like a long keyboard, right, of piano keys, you're restricting one side of the keyboard is also restricting the other side. So you only have two octaves to play in. So
Yeah.
if you're feeling as though you can't access joy, maybe look at your anger. If you
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
feel you can't access contentment, maybe look at frustration and allow yourselves to get in touch with those different sides of yourselves to see if it might widen the amount of keys that you have to use to play all the emotions of your life. And that's why it's funny, EFT or emotional freedom techniques, really it's about not the freedom from emotions, it's the freedom to feel our emotions. So it's the freedom to have the full breadth and depth of our emotions and not to be so afraid of them to feel them. And so it's the ability to allow yourself to feel anger but not get stuck in anger. It's the ability to allow yourself to feel fear but not be stuck in fear. You
Mhm.
go there, you feel it, and then you let it go.
Mm. Ooh, talk about bringing back your power.
Hmm. Yeah.
So where can if where can individuals start, right? Like maybe they're like, okay, this sounds really interesting. I'm really intrigued. What would you say is their next step forward?
I love to tell people that the techniques that I practice, often many of them are self-applied.
Mhm.
And so you can work with a practitioner, especially if you have deeper issues that you want to clear or a limiting belief that you keep bumping your head against over and over. Sometimes it's great to have space held for you in a one-to-one practitioner setting, but these are also self-applied. So if you wanted to begin practicing techniques, somatic techniques to rebalance your nervous system, YouTube is a wonderful free option to do that. There are many people on YouTube that post free resources related to learning how to tap. The tapping solution is a great option as well. It's something you can download to your phone and you can follow along with different taps that they do. And many of those are about 10 minutes long. And so if you're feeling a really intense emotion in the moment, if you're feeling anxiety or you're feeling anger, 10 minutes of tapping is pretty good in helping you recalibrate your nervous system and turning off that fight or flight response when it comes to those negative emotions. Um, Another YouTube resource that I usually tell people about is called Heart Math. So Heart Math is a technique that I use and have taught to many, many people over the years, where it's about bringing your heart into coherence, which is a little bit different than going into relaxation, so to speak. Relaxation is you sitting on a lounger outside next to the pool, having a pina colada, scrolling on your phone. Whereas coherence is actually, it has to do with your heart rate variability. And heart rate variability is an overall measure of wellness inside of your body. We know from the research that we can tell years ahead of time before someone develops heart disease or diabetes or another health condition, if their heart rate variability is very low, we know that disease and the disease process is on its way. And so learning how to build heart rate coherence, learning how to bring yourself into that coherent pattern, not only addresses what's happening in the moment, but is also building health and resilience for years to come. And how you do that is by a combination of breath support as well as visualization. So when you bring yourself into a space where you can breathe in, they usually say in for a count of 6, out for a count of 6. But really you just want to have your breath balanced in a longer, deeper breath than would be normal for you. They took off the 6 counts a few years ago because some people with COPD or other lung conditions found it hard to control their breath in that way. And so they just encourage you now to lengthen your breath and deepen your breath on the in and out breath, balancing the two. But once you can do that, and you do that for about 60 seconds, you have brought your heart into coherence, which means that the waveform pattern is more consistent between the amplitude of the beats and the distance between beats. And once you do that, your heart will send a message through your vagus nerve, which is your 10th cranial nerve. It has about 80% of the messages are sent from the heart to the brain. And it'll tell the brain, hey, the heart's in coherence. That must mean that we're safe. I guess maybe we don't need to have all these scary thoughts that are happening right now. And so it takes your brain out of survival mode and out of the back part of your brain, and it brings you back into the frontal lobe, which is your executive function. That's where you're thinking and planning and organizing. And what happens is your heart, in that coherent rhythm, it will entrain with your brain waves. And all of a sudden, your EEG and your EKG will both have consistent heart rhythm and brain rhythm. And what that does, it sends a message to all the other organs in your body and all the other nerves. And it says, hey guys, we're safe right now. Our heart and our brain said we're safe. So we don't really need to be freaking out. And so any adrenaline or cortisol that your body may have had, it will begin to turn down. It'll turn off, and it'll release the DHEA. It'll release the acetylcholine and the oxytocin, and you'll begin to feel better. You'll begin to feel more centered and grounded. So it's a very quick technique that once you begin to practice this little by little over time, I usually recommend 1 to 3 times a day, 1 to 3 minutes a time, because what we're doing is we're introducing those micro moments of allowing you to go from fight or flight into rest and repair. And so those little micro moments are where you're showing up for your nervous system and your body, and you're saying, look, guys, I'm going to show up for you from now on. And at first, it's just going to be little moments of this. But over time, I'm going to build up to more and more moments of this until the point you're in the grocery store and you're starting to feel a little bit of irritation because someone in line in front of you is paying with quarters. And you're like, I've got to go. and you're able to put yourself into heart coherence. You're able to bring your body back to a place of stillness, of coherence, of thinking higher order thoughts, and being able to resist that impulse to get frustrated and then start snapping at people, which I've never been there. I don't know anything about.
This stuff makes me want to cry because for me, it truly shows the divine nature of our bodies when we are able to connect with our breath. And it's so fascinating because we also know, on top of everything that you shared as far as the heart and brain being in coherence with each other, we know it actually changes how you digest food and calories. Like it literally has such a snowball effect to ultimately how your body functions, which is beyond my level of understanding. And I just think that it's so precious that we are able to practice giving that to our body so that it can feel safe, because we truly all want to feel safe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the mentors in my EFT program, he talked about how he lost 40 pounds, I think it was, and 40 pounds he knew that he needed to lose for many years and had not been able to do it. And he talked about how he used tapping before every meal. And so he would do 5 minutes of tapping before he began eating so that he could calm and regulate his nervous system. And using heart math in a similar way could also be able to address the nervous system. Because you're right, I don't know if you've ever been in a place where when you're feeling really dysregulated, you just start shoving the food in your mouth. You're not even tasting it or even paying attention to how much you're eating at one time. Eating in front of our phone and the television does the same thing because we're not paying attention to the cues of whether we're actually still hungry or not. And we're not paying attention to the taste, the flavor, and the texture of the food in our mouths. And when our nervous system is regulated, we are more in touch with our body in general. And we're able to pay attention to those things better.
100%. I mean, I used to binge eat. I would finish a whole pint of Ben and Jerry's and a pizza, and I would not I would not even be able to recognize that what I experienced. It was just like, oh, it was gone. And part of the healing journey, even with that, was becoming present to the moment and connecting with my body in a way that had nothing to do with a calorie count. So there's just so many other modalities that we can really work with to better understand and listen to what the body is needing in that moment.
I think you're so right. Moments like that are really when I think about Gabor Mate and his idea of compassionate inquiry, right? And we ask ourselves questions like, what is it that I'm really needing in this moment?
Yes.
Because my choice to reach for the ice cream or the pizza is about soothing myself.
Yes.
It's about offering myself nurturing. It's reflecting that I've had a really tough day or a really tough week or a really tough year, and I am just trying to take care of myself.
Mhm.
Well, what could I do to take care of myself in a way that will make me feel better?
Mhm.
Because I know at the end of this pint of Ben and Jerry's or this pizza that in the time that I'm eating it, I might feel better, but when I'm done, I'm not going to feel better.
Oh yeah, Kim, and that gets into a whole thing because that was actually a very vulnerable experience because I had to actually identify that I had more needs than food. Like I had to identify that what I really needed was a hug, or what I really needed was compassion, or what I really needed was a good walk outside. And that took, I mean, you have to be vulnerable with that to say even that you need those things. And then it took courage to be able to give those things to myself, and that's something that I love to help women identify, one, and then two, step into, because it really does change your relationship with self and your relationship with your body.
Mhm. What it does is it brings love into the equation.
Yes.
And so many of us who struggle with our body and our image of our body have trouble loving ourselves, have trouble accepting ourselves. One of the key pieces of EFT is whenever you start a tapping round, you start with a setup statement. And at the end of each setup statement, there's a section where we say, even though I feel this way, I completely love and accept myself,
Mm.
which is really difficult to say sometimes if
Yeah.
it's not true.
Sure.
And sometimes people struggle with saying that. And there's a movement inside the EFT community where you check in with people, does that feel okay to say? But oftentimes I don't say that. I don't say, does that feel okay to say? Because I want you to know what it feels like to say that, even when it doesn't feel true, even when it doesn't feel right, because we have to learn how to say, I love and accept myself just the way I am. Carl Jung and Carl Rogers were the psychotherapists that talk about in order to change anything about ourselves, first we have to accept ourselves. And that means accepting ourselves the way we look now, accepting and loving ourselves the way we look now, and having compassion for how we got here and how really what we were doing was trying to take care of ourselves in the only way that we knew how. And now we're learning a new way.
Mhm. Even when you say that, Kim, there's so much compassion in that versus, right? Like maybe what kind of what we started with is we have been taught to shame, blame, guilt when that doesn't help us. It's the compassion, it's the understanding, it's the acceptance, it's the acknowledgement that really allows us to step into true self-love, that might not feel all like rosy initially.
One of the classes that I took had to do with our bodies and binge eating and understanding the behavior behind that. And one of the techniques that the instructor was talking about was sending love to parts of our body that normally we don't. So, like, if you have a round belly and you don't love that round belly, like sending love to that belly and being like, you're the belly that held the babies that I brought into this world. You are the arms that carried these babies and held them and soothed them and loved them. So even though that there are parts of our body that we struggle with accepting, that learning to love those parts, learning to accept those parts is part of the process of being able to change.
Yes. Because now we truly see it. We don't push it aside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh, Kim, I could talk with you for another 2 hours. I love this idea of somatic work because I see again through my own journey and also with the women that I support, we're needing that nurturing and that kindness given to ourself and our body because we're far past the point of where we need to continue to beat ourselves up. And so I think this is truly a healing modality that is actually pretty simple when we think about like and you'll have to learn more about this. We'll link it and we'll also share more of how to connect with Kim as well. But it's not complicated, right? Like we want simple practices that we can put into play to connect with our bodies, to truly love, understand, accept, and acknowledge them.
Yes. And these just happen to be my modalities. There are a lot of somatic techniques that are really highly beneficial that can help. It's really about bringing that balance to your nervous system, about bringing that flexibility back with the somatic techniques, tuning into the body, understanding the nervous system, understanding your own unique nervous system response, and then bringing that awareness to your body and bringing that compassion to your body. So, things like EMDR in a therapeutic technique, somatic experiencing, Donna Eden's energy work, all of these things are things that we can use as part of our somatic techniques that we help rebalance the nervous system.
Yeah. Well, Kim, where can individuals get in contact with you or even learn more about the work that you do?
They can go to my website at kimjacksonmassaro.com. That's Jackson like Michael Jackson, Massaro, M as in Mary, Assaro. Or they can reach out to me or they can see my YouTube channel as well, which is Kim Jackson-Massaro, EFT. I have some EFT tapping techniques that I use there as well. Yeah.
Wonderful. And we'll link all of that so that they have access to that. And I just want to, again, thank you for your time, energy, expertise. This was so healing. I know for sure it was healing, not only for myself, but also for others. So thank you for the work that you do and how you show up for other people as well.
Thank you, Jana. I really appreciated being here.